Good morning, friends. Welcome, welcome. We're glad that you are here today. We get to talk about mountaintop moments. Woo-hoo. While I start spinning a few things for you, telling you a couple of stories of my own, and taking us a little bit deeper into the gospel reading, I'd love for you to just take a moment and think for yourself about your own lives and what, if any, mountaintop moments you yourself have had. They can be incredibly positive. They can be just gut-wrenchingly hard. But there is always a piece of awe and transformation that happens right in the mountaintop moment. So I'll let you kind of come to your own as I speak. A number of people left this morning after the 8 o'clock saying they really couldn't think of any themselves. And then in conversation with them, knowing a little bit about their lives and their history, they changed their mind. So you probably have at least something. So see if you can find that. I'm going to start actually not on the mountaintop, but in our car. My husband and my 7-year-old, our 7-year-old and I were all in the car just recently, probably, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago. And I said something, I think I used the word divine or divination in whatever it was that I was saying. And George, our 7-year-old, very quickly said, "Wait, that's a real word?" And we were like, "What? Yes, it was." Now, George and I have been reading through Harry Potter. For those of you who are Harry Potter fans, this is his first time through all of the books. And so we are book 6. And there is a subject that is taught at Hogwarts, the school for witches and wizards, called divination. And his mind kind of was blown that this was actually a thing, not just something that, right, existed in this magical world. And so we went on to have a conversation and we said, yeah, pretty much all of the words and the magic, right, that is studied at and learned at Hogwarts have real roots, right? Like take, for example, Transfiguration. And any of you who know Harry Potter, Transfiguration is the class that is thought to be actually one of the most fraught. You have the most power because you can change one thing into another, right? So we talked about how you could change a rat into a teapot and then the teapot back into a rat. Anyway, we had a great conversation about the dangerous and powerful role of what transfiguration was, and George wanted an actual definition. Now, my husband is far better at giving simple definitions than I am, right? I'm that person that starts telling you, well, you know, if you go down this street and then you see the oak with the birds and then, right, whereas RJ can tell you in 3 words how to get somewhere effectively. I think what we came up with was one thing is changed into another, right? Transfiguration. So here we meet on a mountaintop for Transfiguration Sunday, and we're told that Jesus is transfigured in front of 3 of his disciples. Let's just think about that for just a second. You know, if you're climbing a mountain with Jesus, something big's going to happen, right? You get to the top of the mountain, and all of a sudden, we're told that Jesus is transfigured into light. And that suddenly, 2 guys that should have been dead, or have been dead for a very long time, as far as we know, appeared next to him and started talking to him. How would you feel about that? Kind of makes sense when they say, do not be afraid, right? It shakes you to your very core. And you might have missed this, friends, or probably you paid attention, but you've already forgotten, that when I was reading the gospel to you all, there was a piece that didn't read perfectly along with your text in your bulletin. And that's because the people who put together our lectionary really wanted you to understand this piece. It started the same way, 6 days. But instead of just saying 6 days later, and you might wonder, 6 days after what, right? What was the thing 6 days ago? The gospel book gave you the context. 6 days earlier, Jesus had been with his disciples and said, who do people say that I am? Do you remember that story? Who do people say that I am? And they came up with all sorts of some say you're John the Baptist, some think you're Elijah, some say you're just an ordinary prophet, some people think that you belong in a mental institution, right? They came up with all sorts of different options until Peter sat and said, you are the living God. You are the Messiah. And that was the first time that anyone following Jesus had gotten it right. And then immediately Jesus said, Simon Peter, right? You got it. Now, what that means is I'm going to go through a lot. We're all going to go through a lot. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be tortured. I'm going to be beaten to death, and then I'm going to be killed. But then on the third day, I'm going to rise again. And Simon Peter was like, not having that. No way, no sir. Which is where we get the get behind me, Satan, right? Line from Jesus. Jesus tells Simon Peter, right, get behind me, Satan. This is what happened 6 days prior to taking Peter and 2 other disciples, James and John, up the mountaintop. Why does that matter? Mountaintop experiences are hard and transformative. Why did Peter, especially, need a mountaintop experience? For those of you who couldn't come up with or think about such a moment for yourself, I understand that this can be something hard to sit with, this idea of the mountaintop. One moment, right, you're hiking up the side of a hill to pray, and the next you find your teacher and your friend beaming with rays of light like a Las Vegas marquee, right? And then you've got dead guys standing up, and a bright, terrifying cloud comes, and the voice of God comes. The voice of God is where we're going to land. What does the voice of God say out of the cloud? It says the same thing that the voice from the heavens said at Jesus' baptism. Remember that? This is my son, the beloved, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. So there Peter, James, and John are all in the midst of it all. And Peter, because he's human, Peter wonderfully does what? Peter starts coming up with a way to make sense of this mountaintop experience, right? He suggests maybe a capital campaign, right? One house for you, Moses, and then we'll build something over here for Jesus. Elijah, I've got like a modern day farmhouse in mind for you right over here, right? Cedar shingles for you, all these things, right? 3 disciples experiencing an event, a mountaintop experience that is not just out of the ordinary, but mind-blowingly alternate reality. And Peter, in all of his humanity, tries to bring reason and to put structure around what is happening, right? So wonderfully human. So Transfiguration, what does it mean? Does anybody know the definition? Would you come up with a different definition than the one that my husband and I gave to our son? Something changed? In Greek, it literally means metamorphosis, right? Like the butterfly, from one thing to something new. Transmutation, alchemy, right? But here's the thing, friends. This is my challenge for the day. What if Transfiguration is more than just one thing changing into another? What if it's not about Jesus being changed upon the mountain, but something even more and even greater and even more valuable. And the key again is the voice of God. This is my son. In other words, to Peter, James, and John, who have followed Jesus everywhere, right, for the last couple of years, God is saying, this is the same guy that you started following a long time ago. This is who Jesus has been all along. On Mount Tabor, God does not transmute or change Jesus into something or someone different. God drops the veil and allows for what the Eastern Orthodox people call transfiguration light to shine through and to reveal to the disciples who Jesus already and always was and is. Do you see the difference? St. Gregory taught that God's transfiguration light that showed up on this mountaintop on this day is not something that just comes to be and then vanishes. It's not subject to our senses, any of those things, right? He said the disciples of the Lord at this time passed beyond mere flesh into spirit through a transformation of their senses, and let them see what God sees. Transfiguration light did not change Jesus. It changed the disciples. It changes us and how we see and understand all things. Transfiguration light, friends, when it pierces our world, whether it's in a mountaintop experience or some other time, does so not to change things, not to change the world, but to reveal them as they are already true. Now, if we can go back to Harry Potter for a second, maybe instead of thinking of transfiguration classes, right? Jesus didn't go from rat to cup and back to rat again. It was more like the charm Revelio, reveal yourself, right? Reveal what is already there. Seeing, letting us see with the eyes of God. Transfiguration light transforms and illuminates our senses so that for even a brief and blessed moment, we are able to see through illusion, right? We see glimpses of what God actually sees. Unless you were at the 8 o'clock last week, you missed this. Jim preached the day, but he cut this out of the rest of his sermons. He talked about it at the 8 o'clock, but he didn't bring it through all the way through. So if you were at the 8 o'clock, I apologize. You already heard this, but I think it's a brilliant way to think about this in his effort to preach about us being not just created in the image of God, but actually images of God, divine images of God. He spoke about that aha moment, right? When we're caught up with something or someone, like a mountaintop experience, and we are literally stopped dead in our tracks. And it takes your breath away. All of a sudden you see things differently. Nothing else has changed. And he gave us this great sound. It kind of sounds like I'm coughing up a hairball. I'm not. His image was, if you were to walk up upon someone and be able to truly see them as God sees them, as images of God, you might do something like this. I see Robert. And what if, between this Sunday and Ash Wednesday, just a few days from now, every time you came upon a new person, or a tree that's starting to bud strangely, even though it's surrounded by ice, or whatever it is. You just practiced a little gasp. People might think you have something wrong with you, so maybe you do it internally, right? But what if we did that for even just a handful of days? Every time you came upon a situation, a person, a thing, an animal, whatever it is, you practiced just gasping. And then trying to use that transfiguration light to see whatever or whoever that person or thing is through the eyes of God. Can you imagine? 1, it would be really hard. 2, yes, people might think you were crazy. And 3, it might just bring you to your knees in the same way that the disciples were brought to their knees. Imagine a world, friends. Imagine a world transformed, transfigured, because we, God's people, the images of God, could actually start seeing with God's eyes. Transfiguration light, friends, reveals to us what is and what is meant to be. And it gives us the strength and courage to meet the cross, which is coming up very quickly, both for us and for Peter, James, and John. It gives us the strength to hope and to trust, because we can see it all as it is meant to be through God's eyes and not our own. Friends, this light does not change the world magically into something that is good or something that we like. It will not transform your neighbor into someone that you really want to spend time with. But you will see God in them. You will see a world literally teeming with God, incarnate with Christ. So on this last Sunday of Epiphany, friends, this liturgical season that is literally all about God revealing God's self to us, I offer you this. It is a favorite line from one of our Eucharistic prayers, and it is this petition: for God to open our eyes to your hand at work in the world about us. That is transfiguration light. And when we get that flash, sit with it, pause, be still, and pay attention, and know that God is with you. Before you start practicing